You've done enough, Dad. This is our home now. We need our space. That's what my son said to me on a Tuesday evening in March. He didn't shout it. That almost made it worse. He said it the way you'd tell someone the restaurant is closed. Calm, final. Like the decision had already been made long before he opened his mouth. My daughter-in-law was standing in the kitchen doorway behind him, pretending to dry a dish that was already dry. I was 64 years old. I had just come back from my cardiologist appointment. I was still holding the folder with my test results. I didn't say anything. I nodded, walked to my room, and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. That night, I started making calls. Let me back up, because if I start from that Tuesday, you won't understand how we got there. And I need you to understand, because I spent a long time asking myself if I missed something. If there was a sign I ignored. If this was somehow my fault. My wife, Carol, passed away 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. We were married for 38 years, and I can tell you that there is no way to prepare for losing someone you have loved for that long. You think you know what grief looks like. You don't. It looks like standing in a grocery store for 20 minutes because you grabbed your brand of yogurt by habit and then couldn't figure out what to do with it. My son, I'll call him my son, was 31 when Carol died. He and his wife Nadine had been married 2 years. They lived about 40 minutes from me, in a house they were renting while saving up for something bigger. After the funeral, after the condolence cards stopped coming, and the casseroles from church friends ran out, it was my son who suggested I sell my house and move in with them. You shouldn't be alone in that big place, Dad, he said. And honestly, we could use the help too. We're looking at buying. The market's rough right now. I thought about it for 3 weeks. I talked to my brother about it. He said, "You know yourself. Will you be happy there?" I said I didn't know what happy felt like anymore, so I might as well be useful. I sold the house Carol and I had lived in for 22 years. I won't tell you what I got for it, but the market was good to me. I also had my retirement savings, my pension from 31 years as a civil engineer for the county, and Carol's life insurance. Altogether, I was in a comfortable position. Not recklessly wealthy. Comfortable. The kind of comfortable where you don't check prices at the grocery store and you sleep fine at night. I moved into their guest room in October. 3 weeks later, I wrote them a check for $40,000 as a contribution toward the down payment on a house they were looking at. I also agreed to pay $2,500 a month toward household expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries. It felt fair. It felt like pulling my weight. The house they bought was a 4-bedroom colonial in a good school district. Nice yard. My room was on the 2nd floor. Had its own bathroom. Decent light in the mornings. I set up my books, my small drafting table where I still like to sketch things. A photograph of Carol on the nightstand. I told myself this could work. For a while it did. I want to be precise about Nadine, because it would be easy to paint her as a villain from the start. And that's not entirely accurate. In the beginning, she was fine. Polite. She'd ask about my day. Include me in dinner. Laugh at my jokes. Not always like she meant it, but enough. I tried not to be a burden. I cleaned up after myself. I did the yard work without being asked. I took their dog to the vet twice because they were both at work and I had the time. The shift was gradual. So gradual I kept second-guessing whether I was imagining it. It started after they had their son, my grandson, born about 8 months after I moved in. I understood that a new baby changes everything. I tried to give them space. I offered to help with night feedings, with grocery runs, with whatever was needed, but I started noticing that when I walked into a room, conversations would stop. That invitations to go places, dinner with their friends, a neighbor's birthday party, stopped including me. That Nadine would answer my questions in the fewest possible words and then turn back to her phone. I mentioned it once to my son, carefully. He said I was overthinking it. "She's just tired, Dad. New baby, new job, a lot going on." I believed him. Or I wanted to. The thing that changed everything happened on a completely ordinary Wednesday afternoon. I'd stepped out to meet my old colleague Howard for lunch. We'd worked together for 15 years at the county and still got together once a month. When I came home, the house was quiet. My grandson was napping. Nadine was somewhere upstairs. I went to the kitchen to make coffee and saw my bank statement on the counter. Not mine. A printout from an online search. My name at the top, numbers beside it. Someone had looked me up. I stood there for a moment. I picked it up, put it back down, made my coffee. I didn't say anything, but I started paying attention differently after that. Within a month, the temperature in that house changed completely. Nadine began making comments. Small ones, but pointed, about how the guest room could be a proper nursery if they had more space, about how it was hard to have real privacy in their own home. She said these things to my son, but she said them when I was nearby. I think she wanted me to hear. My son began having conversations with me that felt rehearsed, about how they were thinking about the future, about how my grandson needed stability, about how things were evolving. I'd sit across from him at the kitchen table and try to find the boy I raised somewhere in his face. Then one Sunday, Nadine sat down across from me while my son was out getting groceries. She asked me, very pleasantly, whether I had thought about estate planning, whether I had a will, whether I'd considered what would happen to my assets. She framed it as concern. She used the word security 4 times in 5 minutes. I told her I had an attorney and everything was in order. She smiled and said she was glad. 3 weeks after that conversation, my son told me it was time for me to find my own place. He didn't say it that way, of course. He said they needed their space, that it was better for everyone, that it didn't mean anything about how much they loved me. He said all the things people say when they've made up their mind and just need the other person to agree quietly. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the $40,000. I thought about the $2,500 a month for 2.5 years. I thought about the Sunday dinners I cooked, and the lawn I mowed, and the vet appointments, and the times I sat up with my grandson at 2 a.m. so Nadine could sleep. I said, "Okay, give me a little time to find something." He looked relieved. That told me everything. I called my attorney the next morning. His name is Stuart. We've worked together for 12 years. Sharp man. Doesn't waste words. I told him the situation. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to do this correctly." He told me to document everything before I moved out. The $40,000 check. The monthly payments. Everything I'd contributed. He told me to change nothing about my financial accounts until after I was settled. And he told me to find somewhere to live that they wouldn't know about until I was ready. I spent 2 weeks quietly. I went to my room in the evenings, read my books, had my coffee in the mornings. I acted like a man who was sad to be leaving and just needed a bit of time. Meanwhile, I met with a real estate agent I found through Howard. I looked at 3 properties. The second one I walked into, I knew immediately. It was a single-story house about 25 minutes away. Different town, quiet street, big windows, a porch that faced west so you got the evening light. It had a yard big enough for a garden, but not so big it became a job. The kitchen was better than anything I'd cooked in for years. I made an offer the same afternoon. The week I signed the closing paperwork, I packed my things. I didn't pack dramatically. No 2 a.m. departure, no theatrical silence. I packed in stages, a little each day, moving boxes to my car. My son noticed some things missing from my room, and I told him I was just taking things to storage to make the move easier later. He nodded and went back to whatever he was doing. On a Friday morning, while both of them were at work and my grandson was at daycare, I took the last of my things, left my key on the kitchen counter, and drove to my new house. I didn't leave a note. I figured the keys said enough. That weekend, I set up my drafting table by the big window in the second bedroom. I put Carol's photograph on the mantel in the living room, where I could see it from the couch. I bought a bag of good coffee beans and a new French press. I sat on my porch Saturday evening and watched the light change over the neighbor's oak tree, and felt, for the first time in months, like I could breathe. My son called Sunday afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. He sounded confused more than anything. They'd gone by my old room and found it empty. He said, "Dad, call me back. We need to know you're okay." I waited 2 days before I called Stuart instead. I want to be clear about my thinking at that point, because some people might say what I did next was too much. I've thought about it. I don't believe it was. I believe that what I did was simply stop pretending that certain things hadn't happened. Stuart sent a formal letter to my son and Nadine by certified mail, itemizing every dollar I had contributed since moving in. The $40,000 down payment contribution, 30 months of $20,500 payments, various documented expenses, the vet bills, the grocery runs I'd covered separately, the repair on their HVAC unit that I'd paid for in cash when they were short 1 month. The total, with Stuart's note attached, came to just over $118,000. The letter did not make demands. It stated facts. It noted that I was available to discuss repayment arrangements through my attorney. I also made 2 other changes that week. I called my financial advisor and restructured my accounts. I updated my will. My son's name came out of it entirely. In its place, I established a trust for my grandson, managed by Stuart, accessible when he turns 25. The trust was funded generously. My grandson had nothing to do with what his parents did, and I wasn't going to punish him for it. I also made a donation to the hospital where Kara was treated, the palliative care wing that had been kind to her in those last weeks. That felt right. My son called 11 times in the week after the letter arrived. Nadine called twice. I answered none of them. I had Stuart handle all communication. My son sent me an email, long, emotional, a mixture of genuine hurt and outrage that I found almost impressive in how it avoided taking any responsibility. He said the letter was an attack. He said I had poisoned the family. He said that Nadine was devastated. He used the phrase tearing us apart 3 times. He did not, in 4 paragraphs, mention the $118,000. Nadine sent a separate email. Shorter. She said she had always respected me. She asked whether we could meet for coffee and clear the air. She mentioned my grandson. She knew I would notice that she mentioned my grandson. I read both emails once. I forwarded them to Stuart and asked him to respond professionally. I did not respond myself. I'm not going to pretend I felt nothing reading those emails. I'm 64, not made of concrete. I sat with my coffee that morning and looked out at the street and felt the particular weight of it. Loving someone and being deeply disappointed by them at the same time. That doesn't resolve cleanly. It just sits there. But I also remembered something Carol used to say. She said, "You teach people how to treat you." She said it gently, never accusingly, usually when I was letting something slide that I shouldn't. She was right, as she was about most things. I had taught them that I could be moved around, that my money was accessible, that my silence meant acceptance. I was changing the lesson. About 3 weeks after the letter, my son showed up at my house. I'm not sure how he got the address. Probably found it through property records, which are public. He rang the bell. I saw him through the window. I opened the door but didn't open the screen door between us. He looked exhausted. He'd lost some weight. He said, "Dad, please, can we just talk?" I said, "You can talk to Stuart." He said, "I don't want to talk to your lawyer. I want to talk to my father." I said, "I understand. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about everything, you can call Stuart and arrange it." He stood there for a moment. I could see him trying to find the right thing to say and not finding it. Finally, he said, "She pushed me. You know that, right? It got out of hand." I said, "I know." And I did know. I had known for a while. But knowing doesn't undo anything, and a man who lets himself be pushed into treating his father that way still made a choice. He made it many times, actually, every day for months. I told him I loved him. I meant it. I closed the door. It's been about 5 months now. My garden is doing well. I planted tomatoes late, but they came in strong. I got a dog, actually. An older beagle from the rescue shelter, 7 years old, already trained, just needed a quiet house. His name is Pete. He sleeps at the foot of my bed and follows me from room to room, which I find I don't mind at all. Howard comes over for lunch about twice a month. I started going to a woodworking class on Thursday evenings, something I always meant to do but never had the time. I made a small side table in the third week that isn't perfect, but stands up straight, and I was more pleased with it than I expected to be. I think about Carol a lot. I think she would have handled all of this better than I did. She had a way of being firm without being cold, which I've never quite mastered. But I think she would have understood the choices I made. I think she'd have told me I waited too long, which is probably also true. My son and I have exchanged a few emails now, carefully, through Stuart mostly. He's acknowledged some things. Not everything, but some things. I don't know yet what that leads to. I'm not closing the door. But I'm not propping it open either. Some things need time. Some things need more than time. What I know is this. I wake up in my own house. I drink my coffee on my own porch. I have a garden and a dog and a woodworking class and a friend who comes for lunch. I have a trust set up for my grandson that will give him something real when he's old enough to use it wisely. I have a photograph of Carol on the mantle where I can see it every morning. And I have, for the first time in a long time, the quiet that I didn't know I'd been missing. That's not nothing. At 64, with everything that's happened, I'll tell you plainly that's quite a lot. I've had a lot of time to think. Out here on my porch with Pete curled up beside me in the evening light, doing what it does to the oak tree across the street. And the thing I keep coming back to isn't the money. It isn't the letter Stuart sent, or the 11 unanswered calls, or the look on my son's face when I wouldn't open the screen door. What I keep coming back to is how long I let it go on. How many Tuesday evenings I told myself I was imagining things. How many times I cleaned up after myself, mowed that lawn, sat up at 2 a.m. with my grandson, and called it pulling my weight, when really I was just hoping that being useful would make me feel less like a guest in my own family. That's the part that took me longest to see clearly. I thought I was being generous. And I was. But somewhere along the way, generosity without limits stops being a gift and starts being an instruction. I was teaching them, every single month, that my presence could be purchased and my silence could be assumed. That's not anyone's fault but mine. Carol used to say that how you let people treat you is a decision, even when it doesn't feel like one. I used to think she meant it as a warning about other people. I understand now she meant it as a responsibility you carry for yourself. The world doesn't owe you dignity. You have to decide what you'll accept and what you won't, and then you have to actually hold that line. Not just think about it, not just feel quietly hurt by it, but act on it. Clearly, firmly, without waiting for someone else to give you permission. My son is not a bad person. I want to be honest about that. He got pulled by someone who was better at wanting things than he was at knowing himself. That happens. It happened to me plenty of times when I was his age. But a man in his 30s still makes choices. He made his slowly, over months, each small surrender to Nadine's pressure, building into something neither of us could pretend wasn't there anymore. And the hard truth about choices is that they have weight. They don't disappear because you later wish you'd made different ones. What I did, the letter, the will, the trust for my grandson, wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that too, because I've asked myself the question honestly. It was correction. There's a difference. Revenge wants the other person to suffer. Correction just stops the bleeding and sets the bone straight. I didn't want my son to lose everything. I wanted the dynamic between us to be built on something real, not on what he assumed I'd keep tolerating, because I loved him. The trust for my grandson was the easiest decision I made in all of it. He's 2 years old. He had no part in any of this. Whatever happens between his parents and me, he deserves something solid waiting for him down the road. Something that says his grandfather thought about his future, even when his grandfather was hurt and tired and packing boxes alone on a Thursday afternoon. That felt important to get right. I don't know yet what my son and I become from here. Some things take longer than 5 months to find their shape, but I know I'm not willing to rebuild something on a cracked foundation, just because it's easier than waiting for a better one. Whatever comes next has to be honest. It has to be built on what's actually true between us, not on what's convenient for someone's budget or someone's vision of how their life should look. Pete just shifted against my leg. The light is almost gone now. I've got a woodworking class tomorrow, and Howard's coming for lunch Thursday, and my tomatoes need checking in the morning. That's enough. That's genuinely, honestly enough.